or or earn. Hello.
Hi, welcome. Okay, so Ian, our presenter, has just joined. We'll wait 5 more minutes for everyone to join.
Avita, can you enable screen sharing?
Absolutely. I'm going to make you a co-host right now. There you go.
Phenomenal. Okay, how do I do this?
Hello.
Hi, everyone just joining. So if you're joining, I'll ask you to mute yourselves. We are going to take attendance. All right, so for attendance, I'm going to ask everyone that's on the meeting to put their name in the chat. And I'll get your emails from the registration. So make sure, even if you put your name in the chat, put your first and last name, please. When you put your name in the chat, still make sure that you registered with the Zoom link, the Zoom registration link. So we have your information, full name and email. Great, thank you. And I see some of you are joining from the clubhouse. So a representative can maybe come up and type in all the names so we have full attendance. That'd be great. Thank you. Whoever is doing that on Justin's screen. Can't quite see your face. Great. So while everyone's putting their name down, I will introduce Ian and Joe. I dropped their bios in the chat, but just real quick, I've known Ian for a couple of years now, and he is what would you call yourself? A visualization specialist at a very big architecture firm here in New York City. I'm sure Ian will share a couple of really cool sites that you might have come across just going through New York that the firm has designed. And his work as a designer helps clients really visualize what their building or what their structure or whatever it is, how it's going to look in the city and in life and in the day-to-day. That's just a little bit of what I understand, but he can explain that much better. And then Joe is a professional in the field of communications. He's a content strategist for a theater company. And so his day-to-day work is very closely related to ours here on the comms team. We do everything from social media to newsletters and so much more. So I'll also let Joe, speak more to his experiences as a communications content strategist. All right. Attendance all in. Looks that way. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. Okay.
Showtime.
Showtime. Got
Cool.
it.
Cool. So I want to begin just first and foremost. If you have any questions, we reserved a little bit of time at the end of both of our presentations for like a full Q&A. That being said, if we have a lot of information we're going to share today. So if at any point we're like layering on information about like something we introduced but didn't fully explain, in those instances, we ask you to just put a comment in the chat so we can pause and then like, elucidate whatever it is we're talking about, because we want you to understand everything. Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna just jump in. Design is the practice of perfecting relationships. That's something I've learned maybe after like 8 years of like doing this stuff. And architecture is the practice of designing space. So my job, oh no, did it freeze? My job specifically as an architectural visualizer is to represent an imagined relationship to space. So it's not just enough to like sterilely show like what's going on, but show how a human body would engage with the space and what it feels like, which is a little less material in the very material practice of architecture. So here's just a bunch of information. My job is to kind of visually coordinate all these different modes of visual communication. So I mostly work with, these blueprints or like 2D drawings, plans, sections, elevations. Sometimes there's a 3D model in the bottom middle, but we're also getting information from the landscape architect, for example, on the right, who is specifying specific species of plants and how deep they should be and how mature they're going to be when we order them. There's also a kind of materials or interior designer who is informing the furniture that we're choosing, like the type of brick, like right down to like the doorknob and like the mats, like all these things are kind of being ordered in an architectural project. And it kind of has its own section in a large architecture practice. But my job specifically is to combine all these different things into one or several pretty pictures. My job, to put it most simply, is just to make pretty pictures, which is low-key a dream come true. So as you can see, we have the different material, the kind of what's called fluted concrete. There's the gravel, the planting, the chairs, all these different things are all packed into one image. And oftentimes this is the first time that the larger team actually gets to see the vision of whatever project we're working on. Architecture can be very abstracted. I'll go back to these black and white drawings where we're looking at things either in pure plan, as it's called, or pure elevation. And these types of drawings are like legally tenderable. So we submit them to the city and they become a contract, which means every line means something the same way every word means something in a written contract. So they're kind of like the real architects are really bogged down with these types of things. Landscape architects have fun, picking plants. Interior people get to choose wonderful samples and get to feel the stuff before we order a whole bunch of it. But in terms of the actual like space and the vibe, they really only get to see what it's like in rendering. And typically rendering is reserved at the end of the kind of larger architectural practice as a marketing tool. But at WXY, we actually love using visualizations in the kind of interim of the design process, where we get to test the materials before we order it. We get to test, these different chairs to see how they look in space. Yeah, which is strangely uncommon, but the technology is becoming more accessible, and I'm just so good at my job that we have the flexibility and the capacity to like produce renderings that aren't for marketing explicitly. So with that said, today I'm actually not talking about architecture too much. I really want to talk about the lessons and the principles I've learned and had to learn to do this job successfully. As a creative person, I cannot rely on inspiration every single day. I need a methodical process that I can refer to time and time again when an image just isn't looking right, or if I can't author the image myself, how do I communicate what is needed to somebody else who will be receiving this information? So we're going to be looking at a number of techniques. But first and foremost, I want to begin with a lovely quote. Let me drink some water, hold on. All material in nature, the mountains and the streams and the air and we, are made of light which has been spent, and this crumpled mass called material casts a shadow, and the shadow belongs to light. So, photography. A camera works by capturing light from the outside world through a series of prisms and mirrors and records it onto a film strip or a digital sensor. So it's pulling in light and kind of holding it in space and time, which is pretty cool. However, on the computer, that's not the case. Because we have to calculate every single ray of light in what's called ray tracing rendering, it's just way too computationally expensive to keep track of literally every photon in the world, right? So the way that computers actually calculate and like render images is through a process called inverse ray tracing. So a virtual camera emits an inverse photon that bounces around the 3D scene, hitting objects, changing in quality, and it converges toward a light source. So it's the opposite kind of phenomenon. And what we're concerned with for this whole lecture and my whole job and forever is this view plane, because the computer is only going to render what is within this view plane. So everything that's outside of the visible camera frame, I shouldn't be wasting time adding textures or like really detailing whatever the 3D scene looks like, because it's really a job of economy and allowing the computer to be as efficient as possible. So this whole lecture is really looking at how do we organize information for that view plane to save time, to save resources, and to get things done as soon as possible. So today we're going to be looking at composition, and composition is really the most of the majority of like what my job is: moving little 3D objects in space and lighting and all that fun stuff. So composition is organizing content within a frame to achieve three things. The first is to make the intent or the story of an image explicit. The second is to make this intent an ergonomic experience for the eye that is pleasurable and memorable. And the third, when done correctly, is to create an implicit layer of subtext with a kind of a story within the story. And the way we achieve composition is by three techniques that we're going to be diving into: framing, leading lines, and contrast. So framing is essentially what we're talking about with the inverse photons in the camera, which is orchestrating the placement of 3D objects for the purpose of perceiving them through a fixed 2D plane, taking a photo. Leading lines, which kind of direct the gaze, so looking at how the subject matter operates within that 3D space, to create like a 4D gesture, if I may. And lastly, looking at contrast of value and color to start to sort the subject matter into a visual hierarchy. Because if everything is important, nothing is important. Everything is urgent, nothing gets done. And after that, we're going to do some example studies to apply this knowledge, reading an image. And then I'm going to show a really quick tutorial about how to author an image. It's not program specific, so whether you're using Blender, Photoshop, paper, and glue, this is applicable. And then Q&A. So, okay, let's start with framing. So we start with the actual size of the frame, or the aspect ratio. Instagram really took a lead role with the 1x1 square frame until it didn't. But there's more common frame sizes like HD or 16:9, which I'm sure you've encountered at some point. And then we have the more like wide screen or cinema scopes that are usually used in films, feature films, sometimes TV. Depending on the aspect ratio of the frame, the way that you organize information changes. So for example, with the square frame, we have to crop out some people in this top example, but the effect is that the main character, Sigourney Weaver, becomes like, let's say like a third of the pixel real estate. As we start to expand that frame, we get to see one, more of the story, but two, how the different elements start to become dominating or like receding into the background. And the information, it's more information to wrangle, I'll say. I don't know how old y'all are, but if you've ever seen this on a CRT TV, this is because the frame aspect ratio has changed. So before HD TVs were everywhere and smartphones honestly even existed, TVs at home were generally 4:3, roughly a square aspect ratio. But movies in the cinema were these wider frames. So if you've seen this warning, it's because they're just telling you, we cropped the image. This is not the authentic representation of the director's film, but we chose, cropping it in different ways throughout the length of the film to maintain the most important information. Yeah, which is a whole job in and of itself. I love this meme. I don't know if anyone's seen this, but it pretty much exemplifies everything I'm saying, which is regardless of whatever's happening in the world, whatever you capture in the frame is what gets distributed and what gets recorded and remembered. And I love this image because, it kind of flips the roles of the different people in this little visual story, but it shows the power of cropping and framing and how that can completely invert and dominate what is the information that we're communicating, which is kind of crazy. But on the flip side, we can use framing to emphasize smaller, more delicate gestures. So this is a screenshot of a movie called Beginners, where it's like a frame within a frame, and even this white mat is another frame to really just show the simple gesture of holding flowers as important. In The Matrix, for example, we see, this scene after a large fighting sequence, but all of the people and all the weapons on the walls and all the statues, we get to understand them in the context of this battle. And then we're kind of, as viewers, rewarded by just this overview of what Neo has done in a single frame. It's pretty easy to tell this guy mash up the place. So there's a number of ways to actually frame information on a frame. The most common you'll see if you've ever done like a photography lesson or I don't know, is the rule of thirds. And the way we use the rule of thirds is we split the frame into a 3x3 grid, and the most important information, you want to have it on one of the 4 intersecting points on this grid. In this example, Hermione's casting all these charms, so we're meant to be looking at her, but then the further subtext, that implicit layer of information is, what's his name? Harry and Ron in the background, kind of relying on Hermione to cast these spells for their protection. So in one frame, we can see who is important, what are they doing, and what are they doing it for? And what are we supposed to be paying attention to first? The rule of thirds can also be used in terms of framing horizon lines. So typically you want to put your horizon line on the upper or the lower third. I was taught to like never put the horizon dead smack in the middle, but you do whatever you want to do. It's not a bad thing. It's just something to consider. Another more technical framing device is this golden spiral, which maybe you've seen when people talk about cauliflower or like shells. But this spiral is literally everywhere in nature, in movies. A lot of the slides in this presentation are kind of focusing on the spiral. I won't even talk about how it's generated, but the way we use it is that we put the most important information in the kind of tightest or the beginning of that spiral. And I mentioned earlier, like ergonomic for the eye. This is that. And it kind of, we naturally want our eye to move throughout the frame. So we're looking at these 2 kids that are fighting, and then as our eye is directed, we get a sense of, okay, it's in a room, okay, it's a staircase. And the spiral ends with this secondary information of this woman looking at this, happening. And another like Easter egg to consider is how where this kind of frame ends, we have these vertical, moments framing that, but we'll talk about that in just a sec. Another thing to consider is this kind of crosshair, this very equal 2x2 grid. It's not as common, but if you've ever seen a Wes Anderson movie, he has this very specific style and vibe to his films, and The reason is because he uses a lot of this really explicitly symmetrical framing to give this very like orderly and almost surreal, I think, feeling, because I guess we've been conditioned to not see this on screen. I don't know. And then the kind of extension of that crosshair is this kind of diagonal where we're really just looking at one point in the frame, which is the dead smack center, and everything is converging towards that. And that's the most important thing. And look at this. And yeah, which kind of naturally brings us to leading lines. So leading lines is basically just analyzing the content in the frame and like looking at what are the dominant geometrical gestures. So these are two renderings of the same building. It's a comfort station in Arvern, which exists now. We just kind of finished this project. It's being finished as we speak. But the way we frame it actually kind of communicates two vibes. So on the left, it's dynamic, there's this rhythm, there's this movement, it's this very like heroic kind of architectural shot showing all these different vertical and horizontal members. But then if we look at the frame to the right, like the kind of convergence is subdued, and we're kind of looking more at these parallel lines to communicate a more intimate moment and how the building connects to nature. And again, the horizon. So two buildings, two vibes, just two ways of orchestrating lines. Also, leading lines, not in architectural visualization, is literally just leads your eye to the subject, whether that's through explicit like straight lines or more kind of meandering gestures. Leading lines and subjects kind of work hand in hand. So you want to place your subject where the kind of environment frames them best. And sometimes, and if you're doing this correctly, you can actually start to, contradict yourself and push and pull the meaning of these leading lines. So in this frame of Gone Girl, Ben is kind of hiding from public view, but the camera is kind of converging toward him. So in this part of the movie, he's very much under public scrutiny, but he's trying to stay out of the like TV and stay out of news. So we're able to communicate this moment in the film literally just through how we frame a single frame. As opposed to relying on plot and all those other, wonderful devices of visual storytelling. Here's another example from Spirited Away, where Chihiro is climbing up the staircase in a kind of triumphant, mature way, which only is important because earlier in the film, we see her on this exact same staircase, like, honestly, like, eat shit. Like, it's really dramatic and painful, and you can see that she's less sure of herself. She's less sure of the world. She doesn't even know the rules of the kind of social structure that she is operating within. But then as she learns and grows and makes friends, we see her revisit this exact same place, and it's way more static, it's way more deliberate, it's stronger compared to the like however many different angles of the staircase we get to show its labyrinthine quality. Another anime example is this hallway in the movie Paprika that's looking at, this main subject falling. And the viewer is explicitly looking at this. Like, it's super clear what we're supposed to be looking at. But by having these very regular lines in this very ordinary corridor, that kind of provides a kind of material to then play around with. And spoiler, he's in a dream when this is happening. So when we kind of ripple that fabric of space and time, literally, it makes that much more of an effect because it's so linear. So by breaking that up, we're able to emphasize the kind of liquid environment of this dream state. If this were just a kind of shallow kitchen, it might not have the same effect. So the author deliberately chose to have this essentially infinite corridor to then disrupt. Take a breath. Okay. So, contrast. The sunlight did not know what it was before it hit a wall. That's another Louis Kahn quote. And I love this picture by Edward Hopper. I think it probably ended. There was an exhibit at the Whitney. I'm pretty sure it's over, so forget it. But I love Edward Hopper because he's this like very like sad boy New Yorker. Like, I would love to see his Instagram 5 years ago if he were alive. But he's a master at able to catch these very ephemeral but very ordinary everyday moments. It's literally an empty room, and the subject of this painting is sunlight. Like, How poetic. I eat this up. But also the masters are aware of this contrast between light and shadow and how sunlight can be this very important figure. So this is the Pantheon in Rome, where it's literally this like rock structure. And the only way that light gets in is through this opening at the top. People to this day do not know how they engineered this thing, which is like kind of flex. But you don't always need like intense heroic architecture to use contrast in a meaningful way. So let's look at the frame from The Fifth Element. There's a lot of texture in this frame, a lot of noise. There isn't a really explicit black and white hierarchy, so it's not really clear what we're supposed to be looking at. But the director gives us clues about what's important. So for the majority of the frame, we get this like material noise of the city and the cars and the vehicles, and it's loud and it's science fiction. But then we have the smooth kind of M of McDonald's that frames boo, police car here. And this red M like is just drawing our eye to like this little beat in the movie where we're kind of following what these two cops are up to. So everything else in the frame is gray, and it's boom, red M. It's very clear where we're supposed to be looking. And then the next kind of sequence of events kind of follows that story. But the beauty of like this type of mastery in kind of image making is that even at the lowest resolution I could find, this thesis is intact. So we have a kind of array of blues and grays and then a little swath of red. And these 2 pixels represent the subject of this story. And further, we also have a kind of complementary colors on opposite ends of the color wheel to like really make it clear, this is A, this is B, and we're supposed to be looking at, let's just say, blue. Another example, in Blade Runner, we have this beautiful shot that's very high contrast. The whites are completely blown out, the blacks are black, like pure black. And really the only kind of gray or medium exposure we're getting is her hand and her face. So it's kind of telling this like, barcode like story, light, dark, for example. But perpendicular to that movement is this kind of the cigarette one, but it's at the same level of her eyes too. And the whole point of this frame is to reveal that she's not a human, because the robots, their eyeballs, they do this thing throughout the movie to reveal to the audience that they're not human. So by creating this like gamut of black and white, Ridley Scott is able to use these very minute gestures of like, the red and the color of her skin to like tell us, the audience, that she's really good at faking, or she doesn't even know. Contrast has been used as a tool forever. If you're a fan of landscape paintings or the sublime, you're gonna see this technique over and over again, which is that objects in the foreground are on the periphery and they're darker. And as the image moves deeper into the scene, things get lighter and they reveal and they open up, and it's godly and it's wonderful, and it's a whole vibe. So yeah, you're gonna see this a lot. I do this every day, or as much as I can, which is, dark foliage framing the frame, and then this huge reveal in the middle. But I invite you to not just see it as center and periphery, but see it as foreground and background. By doing this technique with the light, we're able to communicate like a real expansive depth of space. Because this is a painting, right? That's crazy. On the complete flip side, if we don't have that Z or Z depth, we're kind of left with this very like, what's the word, stencil-like frame. It's really not clear, is this field 10 meters or a million meters? I'm from Canada, so I'm using meters. But if you're aware of what you're doing, perhaps you don't want this Z depth, because maybe your Windows logo looks something like this, and you're trying to communicate to an audience, this type of gesture, very graphic, but done through a kind of 3-dimensional framing of space. Land, sky, period. Okay. So that was contrast. So let's apply all these different things to an example. This painting, The Eruption of Mount Vesuvius, exemplifies everything I'm talking about. So first and foremost, Golden Spiral, we love her. we can see that the eruption of Mount Vesuvius, the painting name, is right, not even like the kind of apex of the spiral isn't even on the tip of the mountain, it's on the tip of the explosion. So the guy who painted this, he knew what he was doing. So we begin there, our eye moves eventually to the tip of the mountain, across the frame, we kind of hit the apex of this other mountain peak as we swoop around. That's when we're rewarded with a little human statue, and then this kind of tangential bridge of people running for their lives. There's a kind of lighter moment in the foreground, kind of showing some main people who are leading the way out. And then this boat, the like mast, if that's what it's called, is like an actual tangent to this curve. So like, even if they didn't have PNG overlays in 1777, the author of this painting knew exactly what he was doing, which is crazy, right? How cool is that? Yeah, so there are some tangents to that spiral. If we want to organize this to the rule of thirds, we get that same, deliberateness of framing. So the mountain, the eruption, is on that kind of powerful third. And if we look at the other kind of intersection points, there's really nothing there. But to contrast this very masculine red, eruption, the moon that's kind of been associated with femininity and demureness, is placed in this more meek, I'll say, position. It's right at that center line, which we've been taught to avoid for no good reason. It's in the middle of the kind of other third, so literally furthest away from any point of intersection, which is to say, okay, masculine is the subject, femininity is, this like background. And I personally don't agree with this, but this image is consistent with the propaganda of the time in ways that our brains aren't even aware of. But if we, yield the feminist reading here, even just red and blue as contrasting colors can, again, emphasize the blueness of the sky, emphasizes the redness of the mountain, and the eruption versus the stillness of the moon. This contrast in color, contrast, subject matter, gender, right? It's everything. This is a powerful painting. Again, I just pixelated it to see if these, ideas hold up, and that pixel is the moon. Those 2 pixels are the eruption. Again, those complementary colors. If we increase the contrast, it becomes very clear these 3 kind of subjects are what we're supposed to be looking at, the brightest being the eruption. And then we kind of have this tension between humanity escaping the redness, but then they're escaping towards calmer seas and, safer lands. So the moon is also this like welcoming, calming space. And the rest of it is, I don't want to say fodder, but, these are the main kind of subjects of the painting, and they're painted as the brightest points. And this is everywhere. It's not, sometimes if it's not perfectly on the third, it's fun to kind of trace, like, where is our eye supposed to be moving? And the way that these paintings are created is you're supposed to, one, look for the spiral, but then once you kind of spot, like, what's the brightest point, or what's the like most, this green lamp sticks out, like, how is our eye supposed to move around the frame to tell a story? So we have the green lamp that seems out of place, but then we have Mama in the corner who's sad, really receding into the shadows. And then we kind of swoop around to see this, child in bed sick, to like really organize the information in this frame. Again, they're using colors, complementary colors. And if they're kind of diverging from this rule, the kind of tertiary color is the perpendicular bisector on the color wheel. So using an accent color or choosing an accent color can be less expressive and more metered and deliberate, because you can't rely on vibes alone. Like, you need principles at a certain point. Okay, so it's fun to make, these soft gestural paintings of like humans and nature, but unfortunately, I don't have the privilege of creating these masterworks every day. My job is to communicate hard, sterile, static spaces, surfaces. Maybe the grass is soft. But I'm applying all of these exact same things to my work. So I put the truck as the main kind of subject of this rendering. There wasn't time to re-render because this deadline was crazy. But everybody was like, remove the truck, remove the truck. But I put it on purpose because my daddy is a trucker. And I remember pulling up to these, campuses delivering stuff at like 4 or 5 a.m. before people are really activating the space. And this is a real kind of moment in space and time that I wanted to capture to show this like 6 million square foot proposal that we lost in a kind of organized way. So if we look at kind of key points of where this golden spiral intersects with subject matter, we have again, David, thank you. We have again the truck, and then you see these like 2 people signing for a delivery. And then if we follow around, there's this guy who's probably mansplaining to this woman, and she's like, whatever, I'm gonna just look for my like cigarette and my purse. We swoop around, we see this one guy entering an office. It's the one light is on, so it's supposed to be like it's very early morning. He's opening up. And then the spiral ends the bottom left where these scientists, I mean, it was supposed to be like a research, like 3D printing facility. And I just found a robot arm 3D model on like Google. And this was how I communicated the usage of this building in a deadline where I don't have infinite time or money to test out how these work. So relying on these principles. I don't know if I did the color contrast thing strongly as I could have. I don't think I needed to for this image. But if we look at the value contrast, we have that darkness on the sides of the frames in the foreground and this bright kind of beckoning horizon receding away from the viewer. Here's an interior rendering. I literally forgot that this was in here. Same thing, you know, putting laptop cherries as the main subject. Okay, then it's tree, then it's lamp, then it's painting. And I rotated this plant to be perfectly tangential to the end of the spiral. Even if you're not telling these like great historical, like epic images, it can still be organized in a way that makes sense. One of my coworkers described my style of placing objects in a 3D scene as you just missed somebody, which I think is like spot on and super fun. But again, organizing information in a way that tells the story of the space, the sofa, tells the story of the stove, but also like communicates like human beings live here. And even if this floor plan isn't exactly as they lay out their unit because there's no TV, you can still get a flavor for the scale and the kind of usage. And, you know, we're higher up with the trees outside of the windows, for example. And looking at these leading lines, not as like masterfully deliberate, but, you know, we're pointing towards light sources and things of that nature. Breath, take a pause. How are we doing for time? Oh, that was 30 minutes. What? Okay, we're good.
Yeah. Ian, did you want to pause here for any questions about any of the slides or your work?
Yeah, let me check the chat. Nope, just to check in. Sorry, what did you recommend, Avita?
Do you want to pause for questions? People can unmute themselves.
Not yet.
Okay.
I'm gonna lay it all out because I'm a firm believer that your questions will be answered if the person presenting information to you is any good at their job. So in this like less perfect, you know, masterful composition, there are projects like this. And I'm going to pause for a second to talk about WXY, my architecture office. We don't just do architecture. The firm also does urban design, which is less about buildings and materials and more about like just people and space and how they use space and how we create objects or surfaces for these things to happen. So in architecture, it's always like there's a main character, which is the building, and there's like 1 or 2 events like, you know, MacBook and cherries. But the conundrum of these urban design proposals is that what we actually are designing is a pathway and like maybe some like little kiosks peppered along the way. And, you know, the client was like, oh, we want to see a skateboarder. We want to see an information booth. We want to see a bicycle. We want to see people picnicking. We want to see people fishing. Blah, 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 blah. It goes on and on and on. And it reaches a point where it's this type of organization no longer works because there's just so much information to layer in. It's not just, you know, point or what is it? Thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's just like a list of bullet points that one image must capture. So what do we do? In these instances, this maybe, I don't know, this doesn't really tell a story to me, and I made it. So another technique of layering information is to really like consider things in strips. Consider people who read from left to right. So the way I sated the client while also maintaining my artistic integrity was organizing things in these skinny little bands. So first we have mama and child kind of on this pier enjoying glowing balls of light on water. That's what they asked for. Here we have auntie and her niece, you know, chilling on these yellow chairs, kind of observing the sunset, showing that there's urban furniture for the public to use. Here we have some people sitting on the docks again to show like it's an informal space, like people are allowed to occupy public space. And then we have like a picnic and some kids playing to show like this is a safe family environment. And then we have, you know, somebody skateboarding and these people looking at a kiosk to be like, wow, like information, artwork. And at the very end, we have a guy with a bike, but also further into the frame, a tiny little info booth to show that there is like a larger infrastructure in the design that we proposed. This is easy to draw from a plan view, but in a rendering, it quickly becomes a lot of information. So it's very important to keep it as organized as possible so that each little bullet point has room to breathe. And maybe at a first glance, there's like, what's going on here? But this image is for a client, not for the public, which makes no sense, right? Yeah, so in less of a conundrum, we can, here's a refreshing, cleaner frame. This is from this is from a studio project in my third year of university where we're supposed to design a public pool or a kind of series of public pools and like a spa, like relaxation center. And I was just like, okay, how do I communicate with as little information as possible? So the first frame is like architectural corner detail. Second frame is, okay, there's things happening above us. Third frame is there are things happening further into the frame. And the fourth kind of vertical slice is we're coming from somewhere. So vertical, horizontal, left, right, in and out, kind of capturing all of these axes. In a rendering that's literally a floor, some mullions and glass and brick, right? If this were framed any other way, it might not even tell you where we are. And I've actually been a fan of like using window mullions, as they're called, to organize information and not only to communicate an interior experience, but to use the kind of existing framing lines to start to organize the exterior experience. So we can show there's like a lawn with like a bench and like mega chess. I'm really into chess right now, so I threw that in there. There's like a plaza with these little booths and these little chairs and tables. There's a connection to the city. This is in Dallas. There's a existing convention center arena, so kind of showing that like iconic architectural moment as connecting to our design proposal from the building from which we're looking out. I don't know how to frame that. And then like a transportation hub. So like looking at how, you know, this space connects to a larger network and infrastructure of transportation. And again, organizing things in a way that allows these different moments to breathe. And then the other frames are just for trees, which is totally okay. And this, oh, that's why it's blurry. And this kind of can scale up as wide as possible. So I've done a few VR renderings for the city of New Rochelle. They have this project called Link, where they're trying to close down a portion of a highway and create it into a pedestrianized public space. And there are a number of points on the map that they want to render, but this is just one of them. But then the thing with these 360 VR renderings is we don't have the luxury of a single, you know, finite frame. So I got to do this to everything, right? But if you know what you're doing, it's not as intimidating a task. So if we like crop this image, we can see like majority of the outputted rendering is sky and asphalt. So that's already like, cool, let me just focus as much information as I can about this horizon line. And then further cropping the scene, like this is the actual site boundary of the project that we're designing within. outside of the site boundary. We're just trying to model what was already on site. So we're not designing outside that boundary. So I can just focus all my effort on this tiny little box. And just like that other rendering that was Jacksonville, we're able to like layer in information in these kind of vertical bands. So, and again, like this is the visual way of fulfilling checklists of these urban design proposals. So we have, you know, the super signage, there's like a sculpture garden. I could read all of these out to you, but you can read as well. And again, it's fulfilling those different things in a way that is clean, is pretty, and it's fun to look at, right? Like you want to like strap this onto your head and look around because it's so pretty. Fun fact, during the miserable lockdowns, I would just put on my VR headset and go into my own renderings to experience the sun and like being outdoors and like seeing people in space because that was lost. So these types of renderings not just bring you into the real world again, but sell the idea that it's beautiful and romantic, or romanticist, and you want to kind of sink your teeth into it and see these spaces for yourself and experience them with your own body, which is the ultimate goal of any architectural visualization. If we zoom into a few key moments, we can see, wow, those are crisp. We can see, you know, these different details, sculpture garden, you know, Lincoln Avenue, bike lane, person walking their bike, you know, to the bike lane or from the bike lane. This kind of additional seating that is just behind a bus stop because people deserve to sit waiting for a bus. And have light, right? That's a light post in the middle of the day. Yeah. Okay, so I've given several examples. We've talked about a number of techniques. Before I jump into this tutorial, maybe now is a great time for some questions about.
It looks like someone had a question about creating those VR like 4D images. If you want to take a look at the chat.
Oh, I literally told you all to like put your questions in the chat and I did not read any of them. Okay. Where is this? New Rochelle. Are the proportions to that image complicated? I don't understand the question, but it is complicated regardless of what the question is. It was I mean, you're seeing this very perfect polished image, but it was a lot of trial and error to get it right. Are they hard to learn? I think the kind of unapplied seeing of framing isn't hard to learn. Hopefully after this lecture, every time you watch TV or commercial or see an ad, you're like, is that a golden spiral? And if it's done correctly, it should be, or like rule of thirds. So that I learned, you know, honestly in high school, it's like a photography course, but then bringing it into the 3D software, you know, there was a very lightweight plugin I had to look for to actually create those, you know, overlays in my 3D software to like explicitly like line up a tree or a plant or that guy walking a bicycle, you know, on those kind of crucial moments. The software I use, I didn't want to talk much about software because that requires like money and time and a learning curve that we probably don't even want to do. But I use Rhino to do a lot of the 3D modeling. And then I'm using 3ds Max, which is an Autodesk software. I'll type this in because it's a lot of like literally random words. 3ds Max. And then I render with a render engine called Corona. I know, right? My first internship at Norm Lee in Toronto, I walked into that internship never even having opened 3ds Max. And by the end of like a 4.5-month internship, I was actually able to create a whole image for a client during Christmas break because I needed the money. And my boss was like, you're good to go. Like, you're not poaching my client. And I was able to just do a rendering by myself. It wasn't the cutest, but it was done and I got paid, which was super cool, right? After 4 months of learning, I really credit that to the environment I was learning in because they were super chill and very focused on understanding and not results, which should be more common in a workplace, but might not be. how much time would it take? So the VR renderings. So, okay, I've been doing this for 3 years. So I've gotten good. I've gotten really good. I can do some of these in like 2 or 3 days, which is 8 hours times 3 days. But other images can take, minimum of 2 weeks, or like 10 times 8 billable hours. Typically, these renderings can range from 2,000 to 6,000 American dollars per JPEG in a boutique rendering firm. But because I'm salaried and have job security, I don't get that money, but I'm able to kind of leverage that kind of freelance cost to like constantly convince my superiors to pay me more. So I don't get as much money if I were to sell each of these JPEGs separately to WXY, but that means I'm not freelancing, which means I'm not hustling. I'm not working to find work. I could just work every day. I was employed throughout the pandemic, which was amazing because I'm on a visa. And if I was fired, I'd have to leave the country, which sucks. We are going to talk about photo montage right now, which is like the less intense version of 3D rendering. Okay, I see a couple questions for photo montage, so let's close the chat and jump in. Okay, tutorial. Photo montage is a type of collage art, which is to say cutting and pasting images onto a frame, whether in Photoshop, Microsoft Paint, if you want, on an iPad, I don't know. It's the same technique, but here's how we talk about it. So I'm gonna exemplify how to kind of layer on information. This is a kind of 3D diagram of that same project that we saw earlier. So that rendering of that white boy with a skateboard jumping into the pool happened where that green square is, and we're looking that way. But let's look at another view because it's hard to communicate a space like this in a single rendering. So let's look at another view that focuses on this like play area side pool. So first and foremost, define the frame, lock down the camera so that every decision that you're making happens within that frame and you are freed from considering all the other crap happening around you. So I just chose looking at it from this doorway with this glass kind of thing on the left, and we're kind of looking at the pool. So this is how I layered on information. This was a school project, and I obviously leave everything to last minute, which I don't recommend. So I had to throw this together in literally like an hour. So I'm like, boom, let's slap some stuff down into Photoshop. Like we don't have time to do 3D renderings and VRs. So I'm like, we gotta communicate space. So here's how we do that. So I'm gonna be masking out in red what is being added to the frame in the middle. So starting off with the ground plane. This is a fun material I love. And I just wanted to throw it into the floor because I want to walk on that. So boom. And then after having a ground plane, we want to establish a horizon and a sky. So I literally just popped this photo of a sky, like the first result in Google of like romantic, dusky sun, boom, threw it in. Okay, now we have a 3D space. Let's add in some trees, not the cutest trees, but okay, that gives us a sense of like scale and like gives us a fixed point in space. I did not even model or render or export the actual 3D model here. So I just found an image on an architecture like website that roughly resembles the project I'm trying to do. So I threw that in there, kind of cropped out that middle piece to make it look like this, portal. So placing that object onto the ground plane. And then there's this kind of translucent wall on the left of us. And I love polycarbonate because it kind of allows light to move through a barrier, but obscures the kind of subject matter as you move away from it. So you know what I did? I Googled bamboo hitting polycarbonate wall, and this was the only cute picture I could find. Threw it into Photoshop, scaled it, skewed it. There's a pool, so I had to add a pool. So I just found a literal square pool on Google and cropped it and put it in. And then once you put in all these devices, it's time to start adding people. And this phase of architectural visualization we call entourage. So entourage is just equals people. And again, I mentioned earlier, thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So I wanted to show this very like romantic, like very important, spiritual place for Black people to like have a moment of silence. But then I immediately contrasted that with white boys acting crazy to kind of really make that precious moment take place in a non-precious setting. And then to like tie it all together, putting in some brown people walking into the scene. So we have a kind of thesis, antithesis, and a synthesis showing like, okay, this is a space where we're moving into a kind of body, I don't know. It was a weird thesis. And then again, the power of a good crop can just hide all the crap that I didn't resolve. So when I talk about only considering what's in the frame, sometimes it helps a lot to just crop it yourself. And like, it's like a fun shape, I don't know. So this was like one of like 10 cool collages I threw together for a project. And for my final studio, you'd think after like all these internships, I would be like pulling out renderings. My Rinky computer did not handle renderings well. So I had to go back to my older techniques of just cut and paste to, get these views of my project on my presentation panels. And it did the job. So you don't need like expensive software or extensive training to communicate an image about space that's effective, that's humorous, that is kind of aesthetically in alignment with your values, while still, again, communicating like a real space in the world. This is a competition that I obviously lost because it made no sense to the people who reviewed it. But again, we have these very explicit components of a photo montage rendering. So the sky is what is referred to as a backplate. So boom, that's there. We are on Earth. The frame, I just put this like incomplete white square to kind of crop this architectural rib cage, because that was our like idea for the space. Onto that horizon, we have a focus, which is this giant sculpture by artist Ron Mueck, who plays with scale in a really interesting way, creating these hyper-realistic sculptures of like people and like moments. Sometimes they're really tiny, sometimes they're humongous. This one is like, tall. There's the ground plane. So I like checkers. So I put checkers and chess, onto the ground plane to kind of pin everything onto a finite plane. Entourage for scale gives us an explicit idea of how big the space is and how big the kind of focus subject is. And then shadows to kind of tie it all together. And the shadows are done in Photoshop, but it shows us that all of these things are happening in the same space. And even though these moments were cut together by having these simple, like dark, very strong contrasting shadows, it's a little more convincing of like an image that this is supposed to happen in space. Like it might not architecturally like make sense, but I'm hoping y'all get the vibe. Yeah. So what are we doing for time? Slay. I want to end on this quote from this old book called In Praise of Shadows. We find beauty not in the thing itself, but in the patterns of shadows, the light and the darkness that one thing against another creates. And that's it. That's my whole job. If you want to take a screenshot of this, this is the book. It's not even like a book. It's like a transcribed conversation between Louis Kahn and his editor, where he drops all these like amazing quotes and these like really cool sketches. I got mad ADHD, so it's hard for me to sit down and read a book. So the way this book was formatted was so easy to just like immerse myself in like kind of theoretical architecture. In Praise of Shadows, it's more of like a kind of long drawn out essay where Junichiro Tanizaki talks about Eastern and Western and like Orientalist kind of ways that architecture is treated and understood in the West. And in my job, I've experienced everybody wants everything in like sunlight and white and bright and clean. And like, I'm sure we all know where those values come from. But in the East, specifically in Japan, like they have a praise of shadows and understand that a simple room with like a single like flower in a single pot on a single table like means something, and you don't have to say anything more if the people who are observing your space or your image are kind of literate in terms of these kind of cultural cues and symbols. And then this last video on YouTube by Every Frame a Painting, really cool YouTube channel, goes into the work of David Fincher and how he frames dialogue in movies. And it's just a really great case study. And everything that David Fincher creates, I eat it up. Gone Girl, The Social Network, Seven, what did he do with that Jodie Foster movie? Panic Room, like he's just really good at his job, and it's very refreshing to study and follow the work of somebody who's good at the job. I don't enjoy a lot of movies anymore because they're not considering these very romantic techniques. Okay, that's it. Should we stop for a Q&A, or maybe we should? I think that was a lot of information.
Yeah, there are some questions in the chat. So I don't know if you want to scan that, or if anyone that typed a question, if you want to unmute yourself and ask out loud, feel free to.
Is the image do you feel as validated cutting and pasting with computer software versus old school style? Period. Yes. I think a true artist should not be locked down to a medium. I think a true artist has principles and techniques, and whatever medium that they encounter or whatever medium that is available, you kind of find a way to express yourself. So it wasn't ideal to do the kind of cutting and pasting, but when I apply these principles, and if I do actually cut and paste collage, I don't have any examples right now, it is validating. And that 3D rendering, I feel just as proud of as that simple, pool view, because it communicates the space. I agree with the vibes and the humor, and not everything has to be crystal clear, like 8K, 4K, 3D rendering to get your point across. I think what we're losing in this age of high resolution is softness, and like even like film photography, that grain that people love so much. Like you don't have to have everything resolved if the subject matter is considered, you know what I mean? Honestly, I prefer the cutting and pasting because it's easier. Do perspectives still get used for architectural designs? Yes, that is my whole job. It is all I do all day, every day. Sometimes it's not cute, but the perspectives are paramount. Sometimes there's what's called a parallel projection, or isometric, or axonometric, which is like that kind of a video game, Habbo Hotel, roller coaster tycoon. Even like Pokemon uses what's called a parallel projection, so there are no converging lines, but those types of images are used for diagrams as well. So I do those too. Any other questions? Don't be shy. I agree, collage should look a certain way and give a certain feel that paintings and photos don't give. It's true, right? I think with collage, there's a looseness where not everything has to be resolved. And like with certain media, the kind of media defines the forgivability of the kind of finished product. So if I'm doing a photorealistic rendering, once I have a certain level of detail on, for example, a bench, that certain level of detail needs to be applied to every single thing in the frame. So with like the cut and paste, I don't have to resolve everything, and I can communicate a larger space with fewer gestures, and like looser kind of commitments to material and form, and the things that become legally tenderable drawings. What about vanishing points? What about vanishing points? I don't know. Say more. Do they get used? Yeah, I mean, I think vanishing points, I will say, are synonymous with horizon lines. Sometimes you'll see the horizon, sometimes there's a building in front of it. And again, like placing that horizon line on like an upper or lower third privileges either a certain verticality of like a tower, versus if the horizon line is higher in the image, we see more of a ground plane. So depending on what we want to show in the rendering, I'm considering these things. So in a kind of typical set of renderings for a typical architectural project, they'll want like one view that's like the entire project from like the corner of a street that we call like a hero shot, because it's like this heroic 3-point perspective. And what that is privileging is the sky and the building and a verticality. But then the second image that is always kind of asked for is a podium view. And the podium just refers to the kind of lower volume before the tower begins. And the podium rendering, it doesn't show the whole top of the tower. The whole goal of that podium rendering is to show how the building connects immediately to the street and what is the ground plane experience like, and how does the public move around the building, and how do people who are using the building get from the street, the material of the city, into the building. So if we were to show, you know, the lower horizon line and show the whole tower, that information becomes less obvious as we show more of like a glass tower, for example, and less of the street. So a higher horizon line, or like a higher, I'm like trying to frame my hand in my little zoom window to show like these things. A higher horizon line shows more of the street and the ground plane. So using all those different techniques, I'm able to like ask the client or the design team, what is important? Is it a glass corner? Is it a doorknob? Is it how one room connects to another room? And depending on what the rendering needs to achieve or what it needs to communicate, I start to then apply these different techniques of framing and color and composition and content, that's another C word, into the image to then organize this information in a way that is strong and clear and sellable, first and foremost, because as an artist person, I don't always get to express myself. Have you ever done any film projects before? Have I? In my old job at Moso Studio, we did a couple of animations. But if you ever hear about how Pixar has to render a film for like 4 years, imagine roughly, let's say, maybe like 5 years ago, it would take 2 hours to render like a 4K rendering, which is to say, if in a 4K frame, what is that, like over 1 million pixels? We are tracing over 1 million individual photons with the computer. I'm going to talk about ray tracing compared to video game kind of like GPU rendering. So in video games, if you ever play, sometimes the reflections or the shadows aren't super accurate. Actually, I'm thinking of like Genshin Impact, which I'm sure some of you use. There's like an actual setting to be like lower shadows, like lower high, like, you know, quality reflections, because those things become computationally expensive. And at a certain point, your hardware can't handle all those different details. But video game engines are designed to accommodate that. So in favor of like moving through multiple spaces, as you can see, all my renderings are still, and even the VR, it's in one fixed point and you're just looking around. You can't really move throughout the space. And that's just a limitation of ray tracing as a kind of emulation of how light behaves in the real world. So the renderings are powerful because when that building is built, they can get that exact same photograph, because I'm considering like a realistic sun angle. I'm considering the actual material. So to answer your question, have I done film projects? Once, because if it takes 2 hours to render a frame and a typical frame rate is 24 frames per second, to do like a minute rendering or a minute animation movie is more than 100. I'm not really good at arithmetic, but hundreds, if not thousands of hours. So back to Pixar, when they say we've been rendering for, or this movie was done 10 years ago and it's only now released, it's because like the resolution that they're rendering in and the amount of detail that they're layering into these like animations, like it is a whole job in and of itself. Like once all the creative stuff is done, like just making sure a computer can render that is crazy. The technology, however, is becoming way more cheaper and way more accessible, strangely enough, because of Bitcoin mining. because there's like, how technical do I go? Y'all can just Google that. Like, why the connection between GPUs, Bitcoin mining, and rendering software and hardware. If you're really curious, go on that rabbit hole, because it's interesting. Don't forget your student films. Have I made, oh, the movies I made in school were whack, and I'm not going to show them because they make no sense. Because I'm a free spirit, and I no longer strive for perfection as a child of immigrants. I'm really happy just doing things at an adequate mark. So the films I made in school, they were enough to get a credit, and then go back home and sleep, which I don't recommend because that's a waste of money. School is much cheaper in Canada, so those things happen more often. As in where you were the cameraman. Oh yeah, in high school I went to an arts program that specialized in media and communication arts. So that's where I learned Photoshop in the beginning from like 9th grade. Wow, that was a long time ago. Over 10 years ago. And we did videos, we did broadcast television, we did graphic design. We didn't really do animation or 3D rendering just because there's a lot of hardware requirements, and to like get that type of computer for like 40 plus students, the school just didn't have a budget for. But yeah, I made a couple, like, what are those videos called where like you move through like a school and everybody's like juggling balls? What's that shit called? What was it called? A lip dub video. I was the cameraman on like a Steadicam rig. So it was like a vest with like a huge spring loaded counterbalance tripod. Mannequin challenge. We were just before that. So actually, no, there were some students who did like the Harlem Shake stuff. Yeah, there was fun stuff doing film in high school because the stakes were low and I wasn't burdened by like things like tax returns and broker's fees. So yeah, I did all that fun stuff once. Should we move on to Joe so we can have some time for Q&A as well?
Yeah, so if there are any more questions for Ian, we can tack those onto the end. While we're setting up here, I'd recommend y'all to stand up and stretch for like 20 seconds just to get your bodies ready for this next little discussion. So let me set it up real quick. 1 second.
That's a good idea. I feel great. Okay, I'm gonna mute myself now.
Okay, can you see my screen? Yeah. I just muted myself by accident. Okay. Here we go. Can I hide this? I feel like, okay. Communications and design. Say it with your chest. Number 1, we'll be discussing how history is made. Number 2, appropriating corporate strategies. And number 3, best practices online. Oh gosh. My name is Joe Kinnan. Originally from Philadelphia. In 2016, I attended acting school at the University of the Arts. There, one of my professors guided me to see how my onstage storytelling skills could be applied to marketing, design, and communications. What's the point of telling stories? Oh my gosh. Storytelling is how our history is defined.
Sorry to interrupt, Joe, but your slides aren't updating on if you're sharing
Oh
screen.
no. Okay, let me stop for a second. Let's see. I'm gonna do it like this. This feels easier. Okay, how's that?
I see big green text. Is that right?
That is correct. Let me, I want to go back, but it's not letting me.
Just click the screen.
Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Cool.
There we go. That's my name. That's my face. So what's the point of telling stories? Storytelling is how our history is defined, how history is made. We tell stories through communication. Our most popular mode of communication right now is the internet. When we post our process, our feelings, our designs, our morals online, we create a historical record of that moment in time. That historical record is proof to the entities around us that we are smart, capable, talented, silly, funny, or whatever you're trying to say. We tell stories and make history through books, TV, social media, email, gossip, text, message in a bottle. This raises the question, though, who controls the narrative? What histories have I been told? And how do I decipher persona versus authenticity? What's real and what's fake? To decipher that, we are going to take a look at what corporations in America within the past 10 years or so have been doing to communicate what they need to communicate to make as much money as possible. So this here is a general cycle of how a company sells what it needs to sell, comes to fruition. So I'm just going to go through a couple of these terms just so you have some of the language. So we start with this brand strategy, and within the brand strategy is that marketing plan and that brand positioning. We'll talk about the brand positioning in a little bit. We're going to start with the marketing plan. So in that we have our purpose as a company. So that's our vision, our mission, product strategy. So what are we making? How are we making it? How are we selling it? What's price point are we putting it at? Distribution channels, that's, are we selling on our website through Amazon? Are we selling in Five Below? Market research, that's when you're, checking out what your competitors are doing. Target customers, when you're researching, who's the ideal person to buy the product from you. And then lastly, there we have KPI, key performance indicators, and those are, goals that we try to hit to make sure that we're completing our strategy appropriately. Combined with that is the brand positioning. That's more so what I do in the communications and design world. So that involves creative direction, deciding the tone of the brand, the name of the brand, the tagline, as well as the logo, designing the typography, the color palette, the photography. All of that combines into this little arrow over here. I don't know if you can see, where we measure the KPIs and analyze that data, to see if we've been doing what we're supposed to be doing. And then we take that learning and those new insights, put them back into the brand strategy, and the cycle continues. So this process is kind of happening all of the time, all at once, with every brand, big or small. They typically are looking at these pieces of information to make their decisions. So now we're going to look at a couple different examples of brand authenticity, the authenticity dimensions, and how we can use math to express our super cerebral, design opinions. So at the top here, example A, this is Jim Beam whiskey. Oh, I feel like I missed one. I did. Example A, Mueller Corner yogurt ad, consistent with brand essence. And then example B says Mueller Corner yogurt ad inconsistent with brand essence. So brand essence is typically what you're expecting from a brand, what they typically are putting into your face. So in the notes here, it says, the hedonic and fun yogurt brand Mueller Corner shows a funny ad about the yogurt's ingredients. Most ads by the company show personalized ingredients or products consistent with the brand. In example B, Mueller shows a serious ad about the Red Cross and its helpers, which is less consistent with the brand. So if you're from Germany, you would see that top ad probably pretty often. You're used to seeing ads from this company that look like that, you know, animated, fruits, talking, yogurt, all of it. But then that bottom one, it looks visually so different from the top commercial. The similar message of buy our yogurt. But this bottom one here, they've chosen to move away from their own brand essence to communicate a new point of view. So this point of view is we're partnering with the Red Cross. You know, we're great people, look at us, kind of like that. Okay, going back to Jim Beam. So panel A, this ad refers to the traditional production method and history of Jim Beam's whiskey. So that connects to the brand heritage. If you are of age, you know that Jim Beam's a super popular whiskey. All of the ads kind of look like what they look like at the top there. And a lot of their talking points are how the whiskey is made, how it's aged, the ingredients that they use. This bottom here, example B, this ad shows friends celebrating with Absolute vodka. This ad does not refer to the brand's heritage or traditions. So here we see the advertisement. It looks pretty normal and general. It's just like the bottle and then people partying with sparklers. This ad I'd actually say is less effective, you know, in supporting the brand heritage, because typically when we think of an Absolute vodka advertisement, it's like Russian party culture, it's vodka, it's, you know, fun, it's cool, it's, you know, clear, cool bottle. And so this like hipster sparkler fairy lights moment is a little confusing to us as a, you know, viewer, a consumer of this advertisement. So next example here. So the top one features a realistic plot, and the bottom example features an unrealistic plot. And again, these are all ways that we communicate authenticity within a brand. So at the top here, it is springtime. A mother and her kids fetch outdoor toys from the garage. Having been in the garage for the last few months, the toys are dirty. The mother cleans the toys using the product. That's the ad. In panel B, the plot is as follows. 2 stainless steel plates complain about being tarnished when a third steel plate and Mr. Clean arrive. Mr. Clean polishes the first 2 steel plates to restore their shine. That's the ad. So here, you know, obviously the top is real, the bottom is less real. When we're thinking about putting our communications or our story into a realistic or unrealistic plot, you know, to convey authenticity, the truth of what we're trying to say, we have to think about who we're speaking to. So this advertisement on the top, you know, your mom, your grandma is much more likely to buy that product because it shows a family, happy, clean, whereas the bottom product, you know, someone in my age group might be more likely to buy because it's, you know, bolder, brighter, more cartoonish, and it makes me laugh, or like, you know, there's a meme in it or something. Like where we place our story in reality and time, as well as within our designs, you know, differentiates like how well the graphic performs. Again, and then this final one is an example of having a credible message versus an exaggerated message. So that top one there explains how, you know, if you use this shampoo, your hair will slowly improve over time. Whereas this L'Oreal commercial says your hair will look amazing in 60 seconds. Obviously, the top message is more reliable. However, the bottom message is way flashier, way more fun to look at. And the language is more inspiring to go and pick up the product. Okay. Oh, Just wanted to make sure I didn't miss anything. So all of those authenticity dimensions at the top here. So brand essence, that's like the vibe. Brand heritage, that's a history. Realistic plot, that's, you know, where in reality are we? And then message credibility, you know, can I trust you? All of these authenticity dimensions can be compared to consumption purpose. So that's why we're making this product. As well as brand size. So how many people are working for the company? How much would it cost to, you know, get this company to keep going? All of those things are strategized and combined and mulled over to decide how much ad spending, you know, how much money should be spent on advertising. Then we take that information and we understand what we've yielded through our brand sales. This is a lot of corporate jargon. So this pretty graphic actually has a formula connected to it. So 3 lovely professors at the University of Cologne in Germany figured out how to use math to explain different brands' levels of authenticity within the market. We will not be going through this formula. It's so insane. But this is just to show you an example that like these up in the air ideas and philosophies can be, you know, done with math and a calculator and, you know, real strategy and numbers. It's not just making things look good and talking about how to make them look good. Okay. Best practices online. My advice to you is to make what you want to make and say what you want to say. Understand the consequences of your actions, but understand how powerful it can be to tell your story online. Often the hardest part is doing the work and finding ways to translate our creativity on the internet. So then it's up to us like to theorize why we do this in the first place. So here we see, you know, the analytics from a TikTok from, that says 2020. In the middle here, you know, someone commenting on TikTok and someone going live on Instagram. You know, each of these 3 people have very different reasons for using the applications in the way that they are. So best practices, some of them include creating a calendar for yourself. I know most marketers swear by their calendar. I'm going to go through a few things that I love and a few things that I don't love about this specific example. So this is from Sprout Social, which I believe is a automatic posting, analytics, calendar, social media, like marketer platform, basically, for people like me to organize their life. So one thing I love about this is the cross-channel activation. So that means that the people who made this understood that this one idea for content that they had can be applied to so many different modes of media and so many different channels of communication. So on each one of these posts, you see like, there's something for Twitter, there's something for Facebook, there's something for Instagram. There's even like little Google Plus icons. Like this is pretty old. This is pretty old screenshot as well. But they're reusing this content, you know, both just reposting exactly the same thing as well as changing the format, changing the sizing. Additionally, something I really loved about this is the optimized chatbots. So over here, you can see the brand managers understand what questions people often are asking. Sometimes those questions can't be answered so upfront. You have to wait for the question to come. So they know what questions are coming and they've told Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, to automatically message people to answer. That way, you know, when they go in the next morning to start the day, they don't have to spend, you know, an hour answering the same question over and over again. The app just does it for them. So that's really nice. Some things I don't love about this content calendar, the days that they're posting are pretty random, as well as the times. When you're looking at your social media analytics, website analytics, you want to pay very close attention to what days and what times people are interacting and engaging with your content. You can see here that they're all of these posts are kind of happening around the same time of day. I highly doubt that 9:21 a.m. is the most optimal time for this company to, make a post. So if you're interested in making content in this way, there's so many different bits of information that you can use to come up with your strategy. Oh, go back. Web3 and me. So these are probably the most important things you can include as you continue to be on the internet in this decade. So number one is alt text. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. Second is geotagging. So that's, tagging the location you're at when you're making a post, or tagging a location that you've strategized to, optimize the amount of eyes and make sure there's a lot of people seeing that post. So some people, I know when the Euphoria season was out, people would make their location like Euphoria or the high school or whatever. And that's a strategy to get different eyes on your content that might not necessarily have seen it before. Next is succinct copy. So you want to make sure that you're saying what you need to say clearly, shortly. In social media, people don't like reading. So if you need to write something on social media, put it in the design, because the description is most likely not going to be read. And then finally, consistency. So, making sure that the content you're posting is consistent generally, the voice that you're using is consistent, the emojis, the quotes, the punctuation, all of it. A lot of the times especially for bigger brands, the biggest struggle is making sure that this one social media page sounds like one person. Obviously, if you're your own entity creating your own content, it's much easier to do that. It's much more fun because it's just your own personal world. But yeah, going back to alt text. We're going to talk about how alt text is probably the most important facet of social media and communications going into this next decade. We're going to look at a couple stats real quick. At the top left here, on TikTok, non-verified content creators, 83% of viral TikTok videos come from non-verified accounts, although some certain video genres were much more likely to come from verified influencers. If you can see at the bottom there, dance, challenge videos, nature, pets, and fashion videos were dominated by non-verified accounts in the virality factor. Whereas the top three, life hacks, advice, wellness, fitness, and humor, the verified accounts gave the non-verified accounts a lot of competition. And if you remember me asking this question earlier, who's in control of the narrative, we can see these numbers and start to guess who's in control of this narrative here. So people in control are the verified accounts who talk about life hacks, fitness, sports, and humor. Okay, we're getting more information about who's making these stories, what stories being told on social media right now, how does this relate to me? And then on the right here, we can see these engagement metrics. So that's the median plays, the median likes, shares, and comments. And then we can see which genre dominates that specific metric. So dance videos have the most plays, whereas dance and pet videos get the most likes, nature videos get the most shares, and pet videos get the most comments. So we're seeing patterns now of what content is popular, what's going viral, who is talking, who's leading the conversation. So here we can see the list, viral TikToks by genre, what genres are most popular, what is seeing the most amount of attention. So humor, dance, pets, fashion, outdoors, and then it all goes on from there. All of these different genres can be defined typically by hashtags. In the past, Web 2, me growing up, hashtags were the main way that we would, find different pockets of the internet that we were interested in, or like tags on Tumblr. So like hashtags used to be a really important part of connecting new users, finding new customers, and just generally, facilitating the social part of social media. Hashtags slowly became less popular, and in that, these different social media platforms realized that they could use what Google uses, search engine optimization, in their own platforms to give people the content that they recommend. So in this graphic here, you see the person types into Twitter freelance writing, but then in the two top searches, there's no hashtag that says hashtag freelance writing, but both of these tweets have the words freelance writing. And I assume in that photo, in the alt text, it also says freelance writing, writer, girl with sweater, wooden desk, coffee mug. The point of this alt text, typically it's, when you want to describe an image on a social media platform, it's really useful for people with disabilities, but it's useful for this facet as well of SEO. You can create your own search engine optimization keywords within your social media post by using alt text. So in this alt text, you can write in your, you're posting about, you have a show coming up in a week. The picture can just be like you with your guitar. The caption is like, hey, my show is next Friday, come hang, link in bio. And then the alt text can be like concert, New York City, guitar, and you can list every single detail about the event, the night, you as an artist, your work. And that way the app will begin to read the information, more behind the scenes, thus getting you more access to more people. That was kind of complicated and like a big topic to discuss, but mostly because it's happening in real time right now. So this cycle shows how these different social media platforms slowly built up this, internal search engine keyword system to then maybe one day compete with Google, but like that's all conspiracy theory. Anyway, I'll go through this. So where we start, number one, we publish creative, inspiring, and informative content. Second, that content is shared and linked. Our social media profile collects followers while our website gains traffic. Communities grow around our brand through social media and our website. Consistent interactions, engagement, communication, made through social media and authoritative search engine optimization reinforces the brand's reputation as reputable. Search engines index the website higher. So that means more people are going to the website, more people are talking about the website. Google is going to put your website higher up in the search results. Finally, users find your website organically through these search engines. So instead of looking for like concerts next Friday, Williamsburg area, whatever, they can just find, or excuse me, I had that flipped. Yeah, instead of searching Williamsburg concert next Friday, they can just search like concerts near me. And then it will know, oh, this is what this person is interested in. This is what people who look up similar things to this person were looking up. And then that goes into the conspiracies about like our phones listening to us and all of that stuff. I won't go too deep into that. But yeah, this search engine keyword, this alt text, this is kind of how marketers are assuming this next stage of the internet is going to go and how we're going to better communicate with each other and find content closer to what we were originally looking for in the first place, instead of these algorithms giving us like random cat videos. And then we can see the effects of this keyword system on TikTok. So at the bottom, you see all of the keywords based off of 300 popular TikTok videos. They had a lot of engagement, high engagement metrics. But at the top there's only 3 keywords, and the keywords are FYP, trending, and viral. those top numbers are so high compared to the bottom numbers, especially when you think about the fact that that's 3 keywords compared to like millions. Use your creative energy online to facilitate in real life experiences. As technology becomes more integrated in our society, it's up to us as pioneers to make living with this technology easy. Isn't that the point? Shouldn't technology simplify our lives? Oh. Your voice belongs in our human historical record. Here are some examples of how I've used storytelling in my work. These are all for signature theater. And now I ask you, what stories do you want to tell? Yeah, that's all. Just wanted you all to think about how you talk and communicate online. If you have any questions, now's a good time to ask. Okay, I see the questions here. How long does it take to make an ad? That's a big question. I'll answer the second question first, and then I will answer that question. How much does it cost to make an ad? This is a little bit easier to answer. Of course, the number ranges, but you're typically given a budget either from the company or your own company. And then you find out like, this is where I want the ad to go. And then through that, you decide like, is it worth it to spend that much money? Going back to those authenticity dimensions, like, am I getting the most bang for my buck? That also connects to how long it takes to make the ad. So, if it's taking a super long time to make an ad, they're going to have to cut back in other areas. So they'll have to cheap out in certain parts if they want to like hire, a huge celebrity. How hard is it to make an ad? Sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes it's literally like concert Friday, Charlie Puth, I don't know. But other times you're developing an entire campaign that's supposed to last, 5 years. Especially in these big nonprofit corporations, like you're planning ahead for really far ahead in the future. And that also adds to the difficulty of the ad. So to answer your question, it's hard because working is hard, but I like design and communications, so it makes this job less hard. Where can you put the ad you made? I can share this slideshow with y'all. I've had my ads on TV. I've had them on the Link NYC screens. I've had it up and down 42nd Street, newspapers, social media, all over the place. Does AI make things more difficult? It actually makes things more easy. Thankfully, the work that I do can't really be replicated by AI, at least at this point. But the things that I'm lacking in, so like my writing skills, sometimes I use AI to help me in those regards because I'm not the best writer. So it's kind of making my life a little bit easier. What is the process of your ad becoming public to the internet? So yeah, this is like the review process. Typically, at least in the companies I've worked at, there's about 3 rounds of review. So first, me as the person producing the content, as well as strategizing it. I will make what I think is the correct first draft, and I'll present that to my, closest director, and then she'll give me notes, and then let me know if I need to go back or if I can share this further. We go through that same process with people higher and higher up on the ladder. And then eventually I can post it on Instagram. Let me think, is there more on that? No, okay. When marketing or making ads, do you get easily promoted and noticed quickly, or does it take a long time? That too is a complicated question because it depends on all those factors about like the authenticity dimensions and the brand sales and everything like that. So, you know, it's very hit or miss. Like when I showed you the example of the formula to calculate like how authentic a brand is, you know, that's to show you that there is this mathematical side to marketing, but often it is trial and error, A/B testing, seeing what works better, and then replicating those successes. So it is pretty easy to get promoted like through Meta. You can just throw the money behind the post and they'll promote it for you. But then you yourself have to strategize like where you want that ad to be shown, like who do you want to see it? And then how long does it take to get that promotion to happen? Oh, notice, how long does it take to get noticed? It depends. I've had, recently there was a like really short form video TikTok reel for a show that's about to happen. And it got more views when we posted it from our own like page organically, so not putting any money behind it. It got more views that way than the advertisement that we paid like thousands of dollars for. So it is very hit or miss sometimes. Sometimes, you know, that piece of content is way more valuable on a specific, you know, mode of communication. Like I'm organically posting this to my feed as opposed to like this person is getting an ad about the theater in their like TikTok feed. Do I use AI all the time for my ads? No, I wish that'd make it easier, but no, I don't know. I think my selling point is the things that are up here. So I try to use what's up here as much as possible. Does it depend on what company you put the ad that makes it more expensive? Yes. So it's typically how much money the company has to spend on the ad. So like the current company I'm with, they have $1 million budget each year, whereas the last company I was working for, the most that they could do was pay for like a photographer at events and pay me like $500 a month. So like it, and you know, that's just like freelance work. And as I'm starting in a new city, it's, you know, difficult to get my foot in the door. But yeah, it's fully dependent on like how much money is available. And sometimes even when there's a lot of money available, you don't have access to it as the marketer because it needs to go towards other resources, or especially in the nonprofit world, like when you're handling a budget, like you can lose your money so fast to other departments within your own job. Okay. Does AI follow basic film rules, or does it take its own path, has its own style when making ads? So the AI, I've seen AI make videos and make video advertisements. I haven't seen them used as actual advertisements. I haven't tried to make like a visual with AI besides like I think there's, when AI was ChatGPT like first came out and we were all like asking it to make hands and they like looked on this stuff. I think that's the only like visual thing I did with AI. Everything else I do with AI is solely like text and copywriting, just because I'm not that confident in my writing skills. I do think AI has its own style. However, legally, it can't technically be considered art, but advertising is not art. You can debate that, so whatever. What is one big thing you need to know when you are making ads? I typically have so many questions when I'm making an ad. Oftentimes in the positions that I'm holding and how I think is most effective as a marketer, you work for a company and you understand like the brand. So that brand strategy, all of that stuff that I was talking about before, my ethos is that the branding of a company is sometimes more important than the product or the company itself. The idea of the company is more important. And so when I'm making an advertisement, or even if I'm just making like social content, I need to know like, how long has the company been around? Who typically shops here? What content has worked already? I need to know like all the details of the events and who all is involved. I need the social handles and the people that I need to tag. Oftentimes there's logos that I need to get from different companies and sponsors. So I guess, but to answer, the one big thing I need to know is I guess what the client is looking for and what they're asking of me. I think I fall into this trap of making something that I find really beautiful and strategically like awesome, and I know it's going to perform well, but it's not necessarily what the client was looking for or wanted. And so I like really having a clear understanding of like what is being expected of you in this design process, I think is the most important thing. Because I've wasted much of my time making beautiful things that never see the light of day. It's not a waste of time, but you know what I mean. Have you ever used the formula you showed us earlier? No. Do you need any electronics or materials to make an ad? I went to art school, so I'm gonna say no, but I think someone who has like a marketing degree might say yes. I don't think it needs to be digital, but you do need like paper, pencil, or marker. Like there needs to be a text and visual component. Typically, sometimes ads are just visual, so it's just an image and you have to guess what the ad is for. But most ads, I'd say, utilize text and design together to communicate whatever they're trying to communicate. However, that does not mean you can't like draw like fake little ads in your loose leaf notebook, like in the middle of class. Not that I'm telling you to not pay attention in class, but like you don't need these fancy tools to just like practice design and practice creating ads and making storyboards for videos. Like those are all things that you can do with paper, pencil. You don't even need a computer. And that's a like big conversation to have if there's more that we want to talk about there. And then Ian asked, how do you balance artistic integrity with satisfying client demands? That's a tough one that I'm still figuring out. Where I'm at now, I guess the best piece of advice is understand that you as the designer probably do know what you're talking about. Your strategy probably is correct. Your design does probably look good. So you have to kind of take your own emotional connection to what you're designing out of it. I think that's kind of what separates like art and design a little bit. With design, like the goal is to communicate something specific, as Ian said, as I said, and then but then like satisfying those client demands. So like I want a pony in the background of this image or whatever. Sometimes you just have to give up and like accept defeat and accept like, I'm going to purposefully make this strategy or this image worse just to satisfy what the client wants. So that's hard, but that's the balance, is like accepting that defeat every once in a while. I talked so much. Are there any more questions or comments, or maybe there's like joint questions for both Ian and I? Oh yeah, going back, that formula, no. I probably will never use that formula. I've created formulas to figure out, to analyze some marketing data, but nothing that intense. Oh my gosh, I'm not good at math. That's the thing. To work in marketing design, you don't have to go to school. You don't have to be good at math. You just have to know what you're doing. Yeah.
I have a question for our viewers. How many of you are kind of pursuing, a career in like anything like visual or creative? I'm just curious. I don't know how we answer that question. Like, show of hands, maybe? Are there like the Zoom clap reactions?
Or you can unmute yourselves.
Photographers.
Yeah, my advice is to not pigeonhole yourself in a medium right now. Like, don't think like, I have to be a photographer. I have to go to photography school. I have to be a designer. I need to take all the Skillshare classes. Like, even I am still young. Like, I'm still deciding, what trajectory I want my life to take, especially my art, because that's the most personal part of us, right? Is the creativity that we like to express. So, always be creative, but don't feel like you're stuck doing photography or drawing or design or fashion or whatever. Like, you can do whatever creative venture you put your mind to.
Yeah, I hear stories from my school, people who graduate from architecture school, but then end up working at like Rockstar Games, making Grand Theft Auto, which I think is like something that maybe you don't hear of too often, is that you can have a degree in one thing and then end up doing something else. But for the people in the chat saying they like drawing or they like photography, you can apply photography if you're like a lawyer, you know what I mean? Maybe there will be value, I think, in really like pursuing those passions. I think one thing capitalism teaches us is to monetize everything we like doing. I am learning that's not true. I went to school for architecture, but if I had to do it again, I would probably want to do like fashion school, because now I'm finding like textile and fiber arts like way more rewarding than I could have even imagined. I didn't know that fiber arts was a thing until like 2 years ago. But regardless of my whole degree in a different field, I'm able to apply the kind of principles to a kind of new endeavor, whether that's a creative endeavor or like a professional endeavor. I'm finding that like knowing how to build a building is strangely convenient when I'm like drafting a pattern for a pair of pants. So what am I trying to say? I'm not discouraging pursuing passions, but I'm encouraging like understanding that everything you love to do will be a tool for whatever it is you do for a living. Yeah, I think it's all like understanding that the product that you're creating isn't the be all end all. It's like the process and how you approach solving problems.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, but just with like my final slide, I think instead of trying to figure out like, what do I want to do? What creative artistic field do I want to pursue? Like blah, 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 like ask yourself, what stories do I want to tell? And then from there you can figure out, well, how do I say that? So at first I thought I wanted to tell stories about singing and dancing. And now I realized that I want to tell stories about why singing and dancing makes the human race better. So yeah, don't pigeonhole yourself. Don't feel like you have to subscribe to any certain type of life or art form. All the things.
Yeah, I love that. I think framing a career and a kind of creative journey through storytelling ensures that it kind of removes regret, I think, if you're kind of always looking at the story. Because I love movies, but I haven't seen a really good movie in a long time. Maybe I'm not looking properly, but I think what's being lost with a lot of like this like 50th Avenger movie is they're not giving story, they're giving CGI, and CGI is only effective when it enhances a story. So, if there's one takeaway from the next 4 minutes, I think it's like looking at like, what's the story here? Like, if it's like an Avengers movie, like, oh, the story is like she wants children, you know what I mean? But like, how are they like what are they putting their money into? They're putting their money into like the particle effects and the explosions, and like they don't really center the story. And I think it's like the most primitive human thing. Like before there were lawyers and Avengers, we were just, before there was agriculture, we were sitting around campfires telling stories.
Singing and dancing, making cave paintings.
Literally. Yeah.
Oh yeah, the writer's strike. True. But yeah, exactly, like these big corporations, these brands have taken advantage of the producers of these art forms, you know, and now technology has taken over and we're in a different world than what most of those people started in that field. And now they're asking for more money because they deserve it. And it's humans doing their job and not robots. Because again, there's like that human touch that like when you're writing a full script, when you're doing a full ad campaign, like you just need that. Anyway, this was a lovely conversation. Thank you all for joining us.
We have like 120 seconds. What do we do?
Oh,
Oh, there's a hand up in Justin's room up back there.
what's up?
They're muted.
Can
in the room.
someone unmute? There we go. Let's hear the member in the back. Thank you so much.
Sorry, he said he was just stretching. My apologies.
Nice.
No, it's a long 2 hours.
Yeah, we threw a lot of information at y'all. I don't know how much will get retained.
Yeah, a lot of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, but like story. I think evolutionarily our brains developed through storytelling. Like that's the reason. Like songs, you know, like songs were a way to pass on history. Dance was a way to, like, low key, like, know how to navigate a forest. Like, you know what I mean? So without an intentful story, whether it's to plant trees or to, you know, defend, you know, victims of crime, I don't know, you know what I mean? Like if there's no story, like that's kind of like the human like essence, I think. And there's like storytelling is everything. It can be through writing, it can be through making ads. I think remembering that is the key takeaway here. In everything you do, what's the story?
So well said. Ian, can you remind us what those rules were before we leave? The spiral, the rules.
Oh yeah, the golden spiral. I would honestly just say golden spiral and rule of thirds, especially for our aspiring and existing photographers. Actually, iPhones even have like a little thing you can turn on to put on like a grid. That grid is the rule of thirds. So remembering that. There's no like golden spiral overlay, there should be, but you know, if you see a pretty picture or if you're watching a movie that like it just hits different, like I implore you to like pause it and like analyze, like, oh, are they organizing things well, or like, you know what I mean? Like look for those kind of marks of a crafts person behind the kind of veil. I don't know what I'm talking about. It's late. Golden spiral, rule of thirds. You're gonna see it everywhere. I swear. You're never gonna escape it now. And I'm not sorry, actually.
Beautiful.
The con to getting good at design and advertising is seeing how people use it to like manipulate you and like use it in nasty ways. So as like ethical people, we try and use this knowledge, you know, with good intentions.
Okay, so that's a wrap. Beautiful way to end. Thank you so much, Ian and Joe. Thank you all for being so attentive, having great questions. 2 hours of lectures and questions. Very impressive. I will see you all at the next tutorial.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.